Hello everybody, welcome back to Forza Horizon 4, and if you're like me, you'll love a good old muscle car. And luckily, Horizon 4 has plenty of them, including the recently released Pontiac Firebird from 1968. And since I wanted to have an excuse to drive the car, and we have a lot of other muscle cars, I figured we could do a little bit of a showdown to see how the Firebird fares. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat in the fact that there are so many muscle cars in this game. If I were to include every single one of them, it would take a few hours of just this recording, and I'm not gonna do that. So what I did is I had two vehicles from every manufacturer. 2 Fords, 2 Chevys, 2 AMCs, 2 Pontiacs, 2 Dodges, just to keep it compact, concise. And that meant there were some exceptions being taken. Probably the two biggest ones people would shout about if I didn't explain it already would be the Chevelle SS 454. I got the El Camino 454, and if I can go for a Ute, I'll go for a Ute. And the Dodge Dart Superstock, because that is in B class, and everything else here is in C class. Also, they only made 80 of them, so it's not really a production vehicle. I'm sort of skinned away with the homologation thing with the Charger Daytona, but that is really pushing it. See, I am very curious how these different muscle cars will fare. It has a pretty big range of PI, but they're all within C class, and I have a few wild cards thrown in. A muscle car from Holden in Australia, a Jag E-Type, just to see if the Europeans really are as good as they say they are, and that muscle cars can't turn, and finally, a Volvo Brick, because why not have an 850R? And fun fact, if the 850R manages to beat a muscle car in any competition, it will A, remove a single point from every muscle car it beats, and then all of the points it takes away will be added to its final score. So there you go. That gives you quite a good incentive for the muscle cars not to be humiliated by the 90s front-wheel drive Swedish box. But we start out with a good old-fashioned session of hot lapping. And for this, I decided to go for a sort of mixed track. It has a decent straightaway, so that the muscle cars can stretch their legs, but it also has some high speed and medium speed corners, so it's not just an acceleration test or just a handling test, it's a little bit of both. Good mix, good balance to test every aspect of the car. And we can start off here with the Firebird in question, the car of the hour, and I gotta say, it is terrible. No other way of putting it, it is terrible. I would say it doesn't fit my driving style, but other cars that didn't fit my driving style in this list were far faster than it. It just can't turn. I mean, we joke about muscle cars, American cars in general, that they cannot turn a corner. This one takes it literally. It's not just a metaphor for European superiority complex. This is an actual problem with this car. It's awful. I hate it. It has no brakes, it has no steering, it has acceleration, but when you don't have the other two, the third one becomes a negative. Let's put it that way. So yes, I do quite like the look of the Firebird. However, it is quite terrible. Awful, in fact. Which is really strange because we go to the other end of the spectrum in the form of the Mustang Boss. This is an interesting one. In the spirit of the modern-day Shelby GT350, this is less of a muscle car and more of a track car. It was specifically designed for Trans Am racing. Similar to the Daytona, it was a homologation thing, but they made mass production like the Daytona, so it counts for this list. It's really good handling. It has less than 300 horsepower, which I should make a point right now. All of these cars have very similar power figures. They all got 290 horsepower, or 325 horsepower, or 425 horsepower. Because those were the insurance bracket levels to keep the cars from being too expensive to insure for people to buy them. So the manufacturers just lied. Unfortunately, Forza uses manufacturer numbers for the cars, which means the 7.3-liter SS454 El Camino makes the same horsepower figure as the Mach 1 Mustang. Apparently. I believe that for a second, yes, okay. Either way, with that caveat out of the way, the Mustang's a damn good handling car. It's very much the sportiest one in the bunch, it's the most like a sports car. Which is weird, because the Jag E-Type's also in here. But it was very good handling, and it had the V8 grunt to get out of the corners. It was light, but it wasn't crazy light. It was sort of in between the Jag and the other muscle cars. And it did really rather well. I quite liked it. However, nothing, and I do mean nothing, could hold a candle to the Charger Daytona. Let's be honest, this was kind of expected. As I mentioned, it's a NASCAR special. It's the only one here with adjustable aero. It's actually adjustable from the factory, produces a lot of downforce. It was designed for the NASCAR tracks. It's got 425 horsepower, and it's a racing version for the road. It's the highest PI car here, and like 5 PI off the top of C-Class, so it's pretty quick. It's got the handling of the Mustang, but it's got the acceleration of the El Camino, of the Mach 1. Not that those cars did particularly bad around here either, but the Charger was the complete package, and having the downforce in the high-speed corners is a massive plus. So yes, we expected this to win, and it did, quite considerably. But one thing of note that I'd like to point out, the Volvo 850R did very well. But not as well as I would have expected, given the fact it's 20 years newer than all of these cars, has low-profile tires, racing suspension, and a fancy aero kit from Volvo. No, it did good, you know, it beat quite a few muscle cars, to the sadness of many fans. But it didn't beat as many as I thought. It was, you know, again, good handling, but it had the similar power figures as the Boss, and it's about the same weight despite being an estate car, because of, again, more advanced technology, better differentials, better suspension, better tire technology. But despite all of that, it only finished in 9th place. Which means that yes, it does gain a considerable amount of bonus points, and it does take quite a few points away, but I was expecting it to be higher up. I know it's mid-C class, but I was expecting it to do better. So yeah, you can see the list here. Charger in first, Boss in second, Hemi Cuda in third. I did not expect the Hemi Cuda to be in third, and it's only by less than 1/10 of a second, 400ths to be honest, which is a lot closer than I thought. It was good handling, and it had the 425 horsepower push out of the corners. It wasn't quite as handling as the Boss, but it was good. It was very good. And yes, just for curiosity, I did practice all of the sections you will see coming later, just to make sure the cars in the front had the same experience as the cars in the back. So, FYI. And you can see down there the Jag E-Type in fourth. Again, good. It's half a second off the Hemi Cuda, though. That's a lot. Again, admittedly, though, it does have about 250 horsepower, so it's almost half the horsepower of some of these cars, and less than half the torque. So, for what it has in terms of power plant, that's pretty darn good. But it did get beaten by 3 muscle cars. So, in your face, Europe. Of course, I guess Europe got the last lap with the Volvo, but that's not the point. We move on to our second test. And this, instead of being a mixed test of agility and acceleration, this is almost pure agility, because we have a speed zone. Yes, I know you're thinking, well, it's a speed zone, right? Yes, but you have to be able to carry the speed. You have to slide it through these corners, not literally, but you do have to be able to weave your way through these very fast, high-speed corners. And that requires a lot of the suspension, a lot of the tires. And in the case of the Charger and the Mustang, a lot of the downforce too. Both of those cars, the Boss and the Charger, produce actual downforce. So it is very important for those to be used effectively during this. And some cars definitely did better than others. One vehicle of note that surprised me was the Buick, the GSX. Did terrible in the lap times, didn't even score in the top 10. But here it did very well, 98.14 miles an hour. Very fast through here. And yes, it was very annoying having to do all of these in the wintertime by using Super 7. But anyway, there were cars that I expected to do good, like the Camaro Z28, which didn't do good at all. And then there were some, like the Buick, that did a lot better than expected. It was very much a mixed bag. Same thing with Hemi Cuda, 3rd place in the lap times, and only getting a 95.6 on here. It just isn't good. I was very, very surprised. Especially because the Charger didn't win. Yeah, I know, right? What? Hang on, what the hell? Hang on, that's not right. No, the Charger, in all of its eternal brilliance, scored seconds to the El Camino. Didn't see that one coming, did ya? The El Camino SS454 beat the Daytona. Not by much. I mean, if you look at the charts here, it's only by 1/10 of a mile an hour. But it beat it. Yeah, with the Buick in 3rd, talk about a list there. The uninspiring SS454, moving up 6 places from this last competition. Then we had the Buick moving up 9 positions. The Boss, though, did not do very well. It scored 8th. That was a 2nd place car, and it lost to the Hemi Cuda. And even more surprising, the Volvo scored a 12th. What? It scored a 12th. It got beaten by the Jag, it got beaten by the AMC Rebel. The only thing it beat was the Javelin, the Pontiacs, and the Oldsmobile. And the Holden. The poor Holden. Not doing great. No, it's sort of been struggling. It did okay in the lap times, 8th, and then it scored stone dead last here. It did not enjoy this at all. Again, I made sure everything was fair here. I had equal experience across the entire testing range, and the Holden still sucked. Well, there you go, I guess. For our penultimate challenge, we are heading to America's drag racing roots. A good old-fashioned quarter mile. And let me tell you, these times are actually very impressive. Looking at the spreadsheet here while I'm recording this, it is very impressive, all of these times. They're all within, like, the 14-second range, for the most part. That's only 2 seconds slower than the cars nowadays, like the average-priced muscle car, sports cars. That is very good for 50, 60 years ago. And as you can expect, some were better than others. If you had the word Hemi anywhere on your car, you were probably good. The Challenger did very well, the Charger did very well, the Hemi Cuda did very well. If you had something like a performance pack, like the Mercury Cougar Eliminator or the Boss 302, which is focused for handling, you probably struggled. If you were a Pontiac, you struggled by default. But some vehicles were really quite surprising, both in their success and failure. The Oldsmobile 442, I thought that would do a lot better. It is a 442 cubic inch monster, and it was not fast. It barely cracked 15 seconds. The Daytona, though, didn't really care, and it won by a lot, 14-3. So there you go. Don't mess with that. The one thing that really amazed me, by more than the Charger, which I was expecting to win, or the Challenger, which also did quite well, is the AMC Rebel the Machine. You see, its sister car, the Javelin, did terrible, but the Rebel did very well. It sucked in the previous 2 events, but in drag racing, it's very, very capable, apparently. So don't mess with the red, white, and blue muscle car with AMC on the badge, as long as it has the Machine along with it. But if you look at it, it is still only a 5th place, which is the best position it has had by miles, doing a 14.5, which is just a tiny bit slower, fractionally slower, I should say, than that Hemi Cuda with a 14.51, 14.54 for the Rebel. Meanwhile, the El Camino has a continuing its respectable recovery to 3rd, 14.4 even pretty much. And yeah, it actually tied the Buick. But since the Buick had a slower lap time, it is relegated to 3rd place. Now, how do I say this slightly? The Volvo was amazing. I was expecting the Volvo to be a comedy car in this run, to be honest, because it's got low-profile tires, which is not good for this sort of thing. Its front-wheel drive is not sort of good for this thing, and it has no power. But, it scored 7th. It was its best finishing position by far, and it was a drag race. I don't understand that. Maybe it's the gearbox technology as it progressed. Maybe it's the, power band? I don't know. It did very well for a boxy front-wheel drive estate car. That far better than it had any right to be. I actually re-ran it just to double-check I didn't, cheat or anything with a modification or two. But no, it actually scored that well. So, a lot of muscle cars lost points that day, and the Volvo gained a significant number of points in the drag racing competition of all things. And finally, I didn't want to do a 0 to 100 to 0 challenge, or 0 to 60 to 0, because that seems a little bit cliche at this point, so I decided to spice things up. And since we have a strange tradition of jumping muscle cars an incredibly long distance, whether it be the Eleanor jump and Gone in 60 Seconds, or the Trans Am jump and Smoking in the Bandit, or just Dukes of Hazzard in general, muscle cars have a very strange tendency to jump many, many feet. So let's do a danger sign. And this one is particularly nasty. It's similar to the speed zone, very high speed, but this time it's on mud, just to make it extra difficult. And again, like the drag race, if you had Hemi anywhere on your car, that was a good sign, historically speaking, based on the results. That was a very good sign. They scored very, very well. The Mustang Boss, though, coming off of a mediocre at best quarter mile and a mediocre at best speed zone, it did a very impressive 474-foot jump, really encapsulating that Eleanor style as it flew off. Very, very impressive. Beat its fellow Mach 1 with ease. In fact, it beat its sister car, the Mercury Cougar, by an incredible distance, almost 10 feet. Is how short the Mercury Cougar Eliminator jumped. The Jag, we haven't seen too much of that in a while, and the Jag, not too great, although it did get a very even 454.45 feet, so, I can't complain about the pattern that was going on there, even if it was atrociously bad. And the Holden finally scored decent for the first time since the lap time. 468 feet, actually did kind of well, which is always a good thing to see. It beat the AMC Rebels. It beat practically everything, and except the Daytona, or the Mustang Boss, or the Hemi Cuda, or our winner. Yes, our winner is not the Daytona this time. No, it's the El Camino. Again, because the El Camino loves to show everybody up in the most bizarre circumstances. Apparently, the El Camino is champion at high-speed corners, despite being a pickup truck with no weight over the rear end. I'm not going to complain because I love the El Camino, but yeah, the only jump of the day to grace more than 480 feet. Admittedly, it was a very, very good run that brought it in the first place. I mean, it beat the Charger by 3 feet, almost 3 feet. That's an incredible distance for how much farther down it is on the PI scale relative to the top of C-Class Daytona. But apparently, the El Camino just loves to show everybody up in the high-speed cornering department. Then we have the rest of the field. After the Challenger and the Camaro, those two were very close, just 0.04 feet separating them. After the Camaro's jump of 472.6, there's no other jumps in the 470 range. Everything, it just sort of falls off a cliff there. That's not a pun. But Hang on, I need to figure out how to say this. But I was very impressed with the But as you can see, the Europeans... But critically, as you can see, the Europeans were thoroughly trashed in this event. The Europeans can't jump for crap. The Volvo, not even scoring in the top 10. A measly 15th place, the coward. Or what about the E-Type 16th place? You coward. The only thing it beat was the Javelin of disappointment. Yeah, the Javelin was terrible, apparently. I love it. I love the AMX, but the Javelin version is god-awful in this game. Scoring last, third to last, second to last, but there you go. Did not help its final tally. Which is a beautiful segue to that final tally, and let's be honest, no real surprises here. The first place will go to the Charger Daytona for winning 2 events and coming second 2 other times out of 4. Second place, again, not really a surprise. The El Camino SS, again, scoring 2 first places and a third. Interestingly enough, though, it still wouldn't have beaten the Charger because it scored a third, even if it scored second in the lap times, it just scored a measly 7th. But that just goes to show how much of a gap these 2 cars had when they win, all of the events. Just all of them. Meanwhile, the consistency of the Hemi Cuda, 2 third place, a 4th place, and a 7th place, will give it a 3rd place overall. And then we have the rest of the field. The Charger and the El Camino were sort of close. Then there was quite a gap to the Cuda. Then there was even bigger gap to the Challenger in 4th, 217 versus 236. So, moral of the story, if you want to win, you get a Hemi. Or, in the 25% chance, you get a SS454. Either way, 5th place, Boss 302. Very interesting. It could have done a lot better, scoring a 2nd place and a 4th place. And if it didn't get that 11th place finish in the drag race, or even that 8th place finish in the speed zone, it might have scored a podium position, because it was very close. Definitely 4th was up for grabs, but it just struggled too much, and it did not have the power. It had the handling. It was one of the best handling cars here, but it did not have the power. The same could not be said for the Buick. The Buick was the torquiest car here, over 510 foot-pounds of it, as Forza officially registers, and that really helped in the drag race and in the speed zone. But everywhere else, it was sort of a big American boat that we are known to have expected. So a 6th place, I guess, isn't too bad. The big surprise, though, is the Volvo. I actually did the math. If you take out the 25 bonus points that it earned, it would be in, I think, 10th, 11th place. But since it beat so many cars in lap time and even more cars in the drag race of all things, it scores in 8th place, beating out the Cougar Eliminator. Both of the Pontiacs beats out the Jag by less than 10 points. Yeah, the Volvo did very good. It humiliated a lot of very iconic cars with nothing but front-wheel drive and some British touring car spirit. The same cannot be said about AMC. Yikes, they were bad. They were very bad. However, the Rebel was sort of robbed. It lost to the Jag by a whopping 1 point. 158 points versus the Jag's 159. You can't get much closer than that. I think that's the closest finish we've ever had, right up there with the some of the sedans scores within 1 point of each other in the Super Saloon Showdown, but it just didn't have the pace. It was the only thing it could do was drag race. That was it. Meanwhile, the only thing that Jag could do was go around corners. So that's why they balanced each other out in that respect. So, conclusions. Well, obviously, the Charger is the easy winner here by an enormous margin. But if we exclude the NASCAR homologation special, the best muscle car is the not a Chevelle El Camino SS 454, which I think that's the result we all secretly wanted. I love the Daytona. It's a mad-looking machine that has a functional purpose. But the El Camino is a Ute. And when an El Camino muscle car Ute can win a muscle car showdown, I will always support that more than the crazy winged beast from the oval tracks. So yeah, see, best, I guess, traditional muscle car that wasn't a homologation special for a racing series is the El Camino. But if you want overall, you gotta get yourself a Hemi. As for the other, I guess, oddballs in the list, the other interesting factoids, Volvo did very well. Much better at drag racing than handling, which is weird for a front-wheel drive car. But handling was very good, and acceleration was very good. Then we have the rest of the handling field, like the Monaro, did terrible. Not powerful, not good enough handling. The Monaro is a failed version of what the Boss is. The Mustang Boss is the best handling car here, maybe even better than the Daytona. And in fact, it's better handling than its more modern sister car, the Cougar Eliminator. Because that is from the same company, but it's got 50 more horsepower near enough. And it's again, a Trans Am homologation thing with the rear wing, with the fancy suspension relative for the time. And it couldn't hold a candle to it. It was just too heavy. It just did not have the weight transfer of the Mustang. But in the end, I would have to agree with this list and say I, personally, would go with the El Camino every day of the week. But that, though, is going to be it for this episode of Forza Horizon 4. I'll be back with more